Hello, everybody. It's Morgan Park, Associate Editor at FrontTowardsGamer.com, and today with me I have Joe Mirabello, who is the sole developer, I guess, at Terrible Posture Games.
Hello.
And we're here to talk about his first soiree into indie development, Tower of Guns, which is a first-person roguish. That term being thrown around is dangerous apparently because people get mad if it's not actually roguelike or whatever, but it's got like roguish elements of first-person arena shooter, I guess, right? So really fast-paced.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very careful to not use the word rogue because it is such a hot word. I just say randomized these days.
Yeah.
It is a first-person shooter with a lot of randomized various content.
Right. So I want to start. This is something I always like to ask all developers when I get a chance to talk to them about. How did you get your start in game development?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, before I went to college for art, but before that, I actually got in the mindset of wanting to make games because I was modding a lot for Dark Forces, which was an old Doom era 2.5D first-person shoot set in the Star Wars universe. And to this day, I think that game has the best examples of fine level design out of any game. That game has excellent level design. And I would make, there's a pretty big mod community, and it was single player only, so the mod missions, the custom missions that people would make were really interesting experiments in single player stuff, as opposed to, like Doom's custom map scene, which was very, very deathmatch focused. Well, not only deathmatch focused, but I just found the Dark Forces scene to be a lot more up my alley. And so, between that and then a little bit later modding Half-Life, it really kind of got bit with this bug where it's like I could make my own little areas that people could run through. And then I forgot about that for a couple of years and went into art and wasn't sure what I was going to do. And came out of art school and started applying to game jobs as just a line artist rather than doing any kind of design work or anything like that, just doing environment work and stuff. And the first company I got hired by was Iron Lore Entertainment, which they did Titan Quest 6 or 7 years ago. And the expansion pack, I did almost every single weapon in Titan Quest. I don't know, maybe there was probably about 700 different weapon models, and of those models I did maybe 670 of them. Wow.
So did you work specifically about like designing the weapons or actually implementing their textures or sort of all that stuff? That's something I don't know a lot about in that way.
Well, the designers did all of the implementation in terms of like the stats and the naming and the lore and all of that stuff. But I would do the models, the textures.
Awesome.
Occasionally any, like if they had any special, any special effects like glows and stuff. If I remember correctly, I would handle that. Okay. And I did a lot of the icons for your inventory too. Not all of them, but I think most of them.
Cool. And so your last employment was at 38 Studios, which, as we all know, sort of had a catastrophic meltdown over some unfortunate events.
Yeah, that was an adventure.
Right. But before that, they released a great game in Tina's Womala Reckoning.
Yeah, that was a very, very well-received game, especially for a first studio.
Yeah, and sold surprisingly well for being a new IP, if I remember.
Yeah, that's the other big thing, is that it was a new IP, and so, generally those are shaky ground. Right. But that was actually made by the Big Huge Games team.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. You worked at 38 Studios, and you guys were working on the MMO itself that never actually got released.
Right, but the company that was making the MMO bought Big Huge when they went under. Okay. They bought them out from THQ, and so we took their project and was like, you know what? This project's like half finished, but we could really tailor this around the world that we're creating,
right?
And make a action RPG that you guys already are making, just themed around the Amalur world. Huh. And so they basically spent the last, I don't know. It was more than a year, but less than 2. We'll say a year and a half, but I can't remember the exact number. Okay. Taking their game and making it an Amalur game. And they did a pretty good job because those guys knew what they were doing. And I guess you could say I kind of helped out because I would kind of consult a little bit on some visual lore because I was doing some concept work up at the MMO studio. And I was, helping to design zones and helping to come up with like some visual like libraries. that we were using for the project, and then they would kind of take those visual libraries and use them in their zones as well. So I kind of helped, like, I don't know, 1 degree versus, I kind of helped with 1 degree of separation, I guess, there.
Right. Awesome. So I don't want to delve into the whole 38 Studios closure itself. There's plenty to read about it out there. A lot of stuff that's still under wraps that we don't need to touch on. It was a bad deal. A lot of great talent was lost. A lot of people were laid off, including yourself.
It was a good studio, man. I mean,
yeah.
I could talk a lot about how awesome that team was to work for, and how cool a project it was to work on, because it was a lot of fun and I was learning a lot. But I will also say that if that project had come out, I would never have gone the indie route, you know?
Right.
It was that studio closing that made me want to go do the indie thing. So I guess I can say that life's turned out this way for me for a reason, perhaps. I hope, maybe. We'll see.
That's great, because, this interview will go up around the time the game's coming out, so I'll just say that I think your game's awesome. It's really fun.
By the time people hear this, then I'll know, I guess, whether or not I'm going to keep doing this full time, or whether or not I'm going to start polishing up the resume and looking to get back in as an artist.
Here's hoping. But so I wanted to ask, like, specifically, how was your transition from 38 Studios closure? Like, what was your process for easing into the indie, or going indie with Tower of Guns? Terrible posture, I mean.
It was pretty. I had kind of been wanting to do it for a long time.
Okay.
But I have a problem with being complacent. If I'm too happy with what I'm doing, I won't push myself outside of work, And so I had kind of been saving up my money and kind of been thinking, like talking over with my wife, like, someday it would be awesome to do this indie thing. And I had been talking about it for a couple of years. And it wasn't until 38 closed and shut down very abruptly that all of my excuses kind of went away. And it was like, okay, all of a sudden, all these things, these reasons I was telling myself why I couldn't do this. Like, I had this project I was working on. I was working for a company that I'd been working for a number of years, because I was at 38 Studios for 5 years. Okay. And so basically at that point, the project kind of becomes your baby, you really want to see this thing finished. That excuse went away. And so it was like, okay, now I have to kind of put my money where my mouth is. And my wife was saying, like, you need to do this now. Do this indie thing you've been talking about for a while and give it a try. And
oh, that's great.
So it took me a couple of months to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And it took me a couple of months to kind of get used to Unreal scripting, because I had never done anything of the caliber of coding that I would need to do for Tower of Guns. And Tower of Guns is not a complicated game, but it was complicated for me to build, especially coming from art and tech art. I mean, I was environment art and tech art, tech art is kind of like you're dealing with programmers every day to build the systems that then the art team would use to make the levels and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I was kind of dabbling with a lot of tech, but nothing of what was required. None of the skills of the tech artist translated directly into like Unreal scripting for me. So I had to learn a lot when I wanted to go make Tower Guns.
Yeah, that actually segues into what was going to be my next question was, like you just said, you went from being mostly just an artist in a game development studio to sort of making this game yourself from the ground up. Did you have to learn a lot of new skills, specifically, like you said, with Unreal? Like, did you have to pretty much learn from the ground up how to actually make a full game?
So having worked for a while in the industry, because I'd been in the industry for 10 years, art side, I kind of knew everything I needed to know. Yeah. Not, like everything, but like I knew where to find the answers for the things I didn't know, and that right there cuts out all of the time, that makes the art job trivial. Right. So like all of the art in Tower Guns, was done incredibly fast, and it could look a lot better, but I made the decisions I made aesthetically so that I could do it as a one-man team. Yeah. But I also did it that way so that I could focus on where I knew I was deficient, and where I was deficient was in the scripting side. Unreal Script is the scripting language that the Unreal Development Kit uses, and it's pretty powerful, but it's also something I never messed with. So it took me a lot of frustrating months kind of getting my head around the concepts of it and kind of getting used to it and kind of figuring out what I needed to do and figuring out what I wanted to build too. So like that right there was like a moment of like despair because I was like not sure whether or not I was just wasting everybody's time and wasting, like wasting the faith that my wife had put in me, saying like you should do this now. It's a lot of pressure for me to want to deliver something to her, to be like, thanks for believing in me from the very beginning. I wanted to make something that was, worthy of that.
Right.
And going in something like learning a completely new language and feeling incredibly frustrated is a good way to feel very, you feel a lot of despair.
Right.
Eventually, like I was stubborn enough and I got through it and I've learned a ton, and now it's like, you take one step and then another step, and all of a sudden you look back and you're like, oh, I have a third of a game. And you take a couple more steps and you're like, oh, I have half a game. And take couple more steps and you're like, I'm 60% done with this game. I actually know what I'm doing, kind of.
Right.
I mean, I don't compared to what I will know later from my next project if I get to make one, but like I have learned a lot. And even if Tower Guns doesn't do well, like I've learned so much now that I can take that into wherever I go and whatever I do next. It'll be awesome.
Mm-hmm. The visual style itself, I think, is pretty great because everything has that hand-drawn style to it, which I think makes for a great visual style. But the gameplay itself was actually really, really good. Like I was surprised when I found out that this was your first game making yourself, because the shooting feels great. Just like the way you enter a room and there's 40 things shooting bullets at you, and you move faster than everything in all the bullets flying at you. So it becomes like this kind of rhythmic dance of avoiding everything that's coming at you.
That's what I was going for, man. I appreciate you actually using the word dance, because I was going for that when I was making it.
It's very interesting. It's almost really beautiful when you just enter a room and you just see like these 40 things. It's intimidating, but it's also very cool looking. And the fact that everything is hand drawn, I appreciate.
Thanks, man. I hate to show you the sausage factory, but I every decision I made aesthetically was made so that I could do it fast as a one-man team.
That makes total sense, because it is a full, repeatable, fun experience.
Thanks. Although I should say it wasn't completely one-man, because my brother did do the music. I contracted him to do the music, and I think he did an awesome job.
Yeah, that also just fits the tone very well.
Thanks. We worked pretty hard to get something that felt different and fresh, and also like you wouldn't find it in any other game.
Mm-hmm.
Like really tied to the aesthetic of the game. And then I also had a whole lot of, like, it was almost like a Katamari ball where I was, like, picking up friends along the way. I, like, picked up a community of volunteers to kind of help me test the game as I was going. Cause
that's great.
People who just kind of stumbled into the alpha, because I offered it up for sale pretty early if people wanted to play it.
Mm-hmm.
They could play early builds. And then some people just stuck with me and were, like, super involved with helping me refine it and helping me test it. So it would be irresponsible of me not to credit them and their hard work.
I saw that your website had actually a progress bar. Quite
it
literally.
Did well. It just took that down last night, but yeah, it had a progress bar for many months.
That's very cool. That's a very cool way to keep everyone up to date.
It was fun, and it was also a lot of fun taking it down, because you could be like, I was at 100%. Move this page.
Great. So the way by which Tower of Guns generates its stages, you call random compositing instead of procedural generation. Because there are rooms. There are set designs of rooms that do repeat, but the placement of everything is different. What exactly is the difference between those two things? Is it really just like the placement of enemies and that sort of stuff?
Well, okay. No, I mean, procedural generation is a far more complicated beast. That's actually coming up with rules and behaviors and letting the world create itself either polygon by polygon or small cell by small cell.
Okay.
And you change those rules, and then that changes the world. So something like Minecraft is procedural, or something like Terraria is procedural, where it's like, it'll generate some shapes and then figure out where the dirt goes and figure out where the grass goes based off of where the top of the dirt is. So it's like that's procedural. Random compositing is literally, it's a super poor man's version. It was something that I was able to handle as a beginning scripter.
Right.
Not really a beginning scripter by that point, but actually a beginner scripter, because it's pretty simple, pretty rudimentary. Basically, the randomization for Tower of Guns is a very large slot machine. And right when you start the game, you pull the handle and you see what comes up in each slot, and that's what you get. However, it's a little bit more complicated than that, because then there's other slot machines on top of it. There's the slot machine that decides what enemies you get. And sometimes there's more than one slot machine per room, so you get different combinations of results.
Okay.
And then there's a similar slot machine for the loot and a similar slot machine for the bosses. So it's pretty simple when you break it down, but the end result is something that I think is at least replayable enough that people feel like they got their money's worth.
Oh yeah, totally. And there's
yeah,
and it has the thing that even like procedurally generated games yearn for, which is I can be playing for the 15th time and see a room I've never seen before, or fight an enemy I've never seen before, and that sort of thing. So that's something.
Well, that's good. That actually, I did that for a reason too. I mean, one is that doing slot machine style randomization it's kind of like a brute force way to randomize things, but it's also so it was simpler to make. But it was also it let me focus on what I knew I could do well really quickly, which was making levels, because I'd been doing that for years. So I could knock out these rooms like 1 a day, 2 a day if I were hitting a good groove, you know.
Right.
So, you know, like this game was really like, what do I know how to do well? How can I put all the focus on that? What do I don't know how to do well? Let's make that not as important.
Great.
You know, hopefully I can build upon that with my next project and continue to learn, and eventually the stuff I know how to not do well will become stuff I know how to not do well a little less, I guess.
Awesome. So I have one more. This sort of leads into that, what you said, actually. So let's assume that Tower of Guns does do well, and I think it will. I think it's a very compelling game that people hopefully buy.
I hope it does well enough that it's. Here's the thing: is it has to do better than what I would have made as an artist in the industry. Otherwise, it's going to be a very hard sell for me to keep on doing this.
So if it is successful, then what are your aspirations? Like, do you already have ideas for another project, or do you really just want to like get past this and then go into brainstorming mode?
Oh, I've got tons of ideas. Like when I start getting into a creative mindset, I have a hard time turning off that valve. And so there's a running gag with me and my wife where I will come downstairs and I'll tell her what I'm going to work on next. And then the next day I'll come down and I'll tell her something completely different. And I've written them all down, so I can go back and I don't invest any thought other than just writing down a sentence. And, you know, some of them are really terrible ideas, but some of them are kind of interesting. Right. And I mean, I'll probably be supporting Tower of Guns for a little while because I imagine, you know, the game hasn't rolled out. A few thousand people have played it, but hopefully a lot more will play it. And when you get a big crowd around something, they're going to find holes that I didn't know existed. So I'll probably have to support the game for a little while with fixing those or with potentially adding in some things that didn't quite make the final cut. But after that, the only thing I know that I want to do is focus on something that I feel was deficient in Tower of Guns. So like I would like to focus on artwork that I can be really proud of on an asset-based level. Right. Like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with what ZBrush is, but it's a really fun sculpting tool to make characters and environment art, and it's what makes it's really become in vogue in the last 5 or 6 years. But I haven't gotten to use it in years, and I really feel like the itch. Like I feel like I'm falling behind because I'm not using this tool, and I'm not refining my sculpting skills. So as an artist, looking at Tower of Guns, my inner artist is crying in me like, let me do something that's smaller in scope so I can make it prettier.
Right.
So the next thing I make will be something where I let myself indulge a little bit. And it'll probably be something much shorter that the inner artist is allowed to indulge in a little bit to make it look like something that can be that's a little bit more visually competitive. That
sounds really interesting.
Thanks. I don't know what it'll be, but I'll let myself run wild visually.
So this is my last question, a little bonus question. Obviously crowdfunding has become a big thing in the past couple of years. I was wondering what you thought, like not whether you plan to use it or not, but like what you think of it in general. Something I'd like to ask everyone, like what do you think of crowdfunding as a way of funding a game or funding projects in general?
I think it's a really interesting idea, and it's been cool over the last couple of years, but I feel like it's wearing down. I feel like it's got a short lifespan left. And the biggest thing I worry is that people come across, in order to get the attention that you need to get a really big Kickstarter now, you have to have a crazy project. Right. And anybody with significant industry experience will look at that project and be like, that project right there is like a $20 million project. There's no way you're going to get $20 million of Kickstarter money. But you're going to promise a $20 million project? And so these people may get, $200,000 in funding, and they just can't deliver on something that actually looks competitive or plays competitive. and then their Kickstarter public feels like burned.
Right.
And I'm just worried that the luster of a Kickstarter may be fading. I may be wrong, because there are always compelling things coming through there, but I feel like the stuff that's most compelling are the really small, focused experiences where it's like they've got an idea, they're showing you exactly what they're going to make with that idea. It's not something that's like trying to compete with the big AAA games in any way whatsoever. I feel like that's the stuff that's most compelling, because like nobody else is funding that stuff, but it doesn't take all that much to fund it. Just give these 2 or 3 guys enough money for a year for them to run wild, and you get a good product out of it, a good game. But so those are the things where I think Kickstarter is really, really compelling. But otherwise, I'm kind of worried about this, like about people needing to deliver on things they can't.
Well, right, because like the Double Fine thing happened back in early 2012, and that's where that blew up, right?
Right, and they got a lot of funding, and even then they couldn't finish the game. And that's a studio that knew what they're doing. Those guys know what they're doing, so at least I assume they know what they're doing. They've made an awful lot of games,
Right.
So somebody who doesn't know what they're doing probably doesn't even know what they need to actually ask for.
And also since it's become so popular, there's just a cacophony of projects that are trying to get their word out to you, and it can be a little overwhelming. There's games I haven't even heard of that got funded, and plenty more that I've never heard of at all that didn't get funded. So it's crowded.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's become pretty clear that in the last year or so, it's become as much a marketing tool as a funding tool.
Yeah.
And people use it because it helps get the word out about a game. But, I mean, I don't know the numbers because I haven't tried to run a Kickstarter thing, but I wouldn't be surprised if most Kickstarters fail.
Right.
I'm not sure. Somewhere on their site, I'm sure they have a statistic of the number that actually do make it through and the number that don't. I mean, it's an interesting idea, and I thought it was really awesome for a while, but I was always kind of curious about whether or not it was going to be able to grow into something where you actually had a big fund, or whether or not it was going to get like split into 1,000 littler games trying to get through there.
Right.
And I think that's what's happened. So I don't know. My experience is so limited that my opinion is probably not one you should listen to.
No, it was interesting though. Yeah, you brought up things I hadn't really thought about.
Yeah, I'm just worried about it. That's all. Apprehensive, but I think it's awesome. I'm just apprehensive about its future. That's all.
Yeah, I think I feel the same. Well, thank you, Joe. It's been great sitting down with you.
No problem. It was a lot of fun.
Your game, Tower of Guns, coming out March 4th, 2 days from when we're recording, but it'll be out by the time you're listening to this.
Yes, it's on Steam,
Yep.
It's on GOG, it's on Humble Store, it's on Shiny Loot, it's on... Oh, shoot, am I missing any of them? Probably missing one.
And
Gamersgate.
There you go. So the launch price on Steam will be 33% off, am I right?
Yes, for the first week, it'll be 33% off.
Great.
And you can also get it from towerofguns.com.
Oh, yes.
This is the Humble widget itself. And you can actually pre-order the game, but this will probably not be out before that pre-order thing goes away and becomes just a regular order.
Right.
And that comes with the Steam key.
Great. And then normal price will be $15 every
Normal price is $15, yes.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.